Hello, and welcome to Casually Criterion. My name is Chris.
And my name's Justin. Casually Criterion is a weekly podcast where Chris and I are going to watch a Criterion Collection film each week, starting at Spine number 1 and going forward.
Today's episode, Spine number 2, Seven Samurai.
Yeah, Seven Samurai. This should be a short podcast, I think?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to talk about here. No. You know, I mean, it's a movie.
Yeah. Done. Next time on Casualty Criterion.
Casualty Criterion.
Casualty Criterion. We kill Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get into Seven Samurai, each week we kind of want to do a little segment of like current movie talk, like kind of what's going on with Chris and I, what we're thinking about, what we're doing in regards to movies.
This news actually broke today, so it won't be new by Thursday, and it's probably changed. But I wanted to talk about it. Disney is in talks to buy 21st Century Fox, which is pretty amazing. What the article said was that they're not actually in talks right now. They've been on and off again, but it just broke today. And what that means is Disney's going to be gigantic.
Yeah.
So some of the ramifications would be that I'm the most interested in, like the Marvel universe would become very much bigger. It could include the X-Men. And,
Hooray.
Yeah, I know you're excited, Justin. Please calm down.
Sorry.
Oh, I mean, Avatar would be part of Disney, and Avatar is about to make 10 more movies, you know, over the next...
I think they should make one first.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about Avatar sequels for
a
long time.
But yeah, it means... I mean, like, what does it mean to you, Justin? I know that it just kind of came out and...
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a whole lot of time to, like...
process it. It's a lot to
process it and think about it, but, I mean, Disney's just huge, and they have everything, and I don't know if this will feel like just, you know, one more notch on the belt, or if it'll actually like feel like it makes a huge difference.
I mean, I think
cinema world,
like it would make a difference in. I mean, we've already talked about it. You know, the Marvel universe and all that stuff, where they could start to combine those things. But I think on a more filmmaker perspective, it's going to make it harder to get your film made. So, like right now, if you go to Disney and pitch your film, and they turn you down, you can go over to Fox and pitch your film. But if so, there's less people to go to.
Yeah,
you know, there's less opportunities to make your film. Yeah, and that, actually, there's another whole thing. I don't know if you know about this, but the L.A. Times or LA Weekly, I'm not sure which one it is, but they wrote kind of a bad article about Disney and how they kind of affected the elections up in Anaheim. And Disney banned that paper from reviewing their movies early. Yeah, so Disney's kind of throwing their weight around, like, and that's not good. That doesn't bode well if they buy 21st Century Fox. No,
it's just like one more step towards controlling everything and having a bit of a monopoly, but
yeah, that's what it kind of sounds like. And you have to pay your dues to them, otherwise they're gonna kick you out.
Yeah, I do think for me as a filmmaker, I have one feature film under under my belt, and you know, Disney's list of directors can only be so long.
Yeah,
and if they take on a ton of projects, maybe I'm on that list. It's like way down there. They're eventually going to run out of directors to make their movies, and then there I am, number 4 million something.
You've got your phone out, you're ready.
I'm ready.
You know, that call's coming through.
Yeah.
Like every time I call you, you're like, hello, Disney? No, this is Chris.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next week, I'm sure there'll be new stuff. We can update you on it.
And I guess just a little side note on that doesn't really have to do with movies exactly, is that Disney is not purchasing Fox Sports and Fox News and any sort of stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was just... I think more like the movie and television side of.
Yeah, that was one of my first questions. Well, you know, what does this mean for Fox News? You know, and the other stuff, because that would change a lot of stuff. That's not really part of our podcast, but it is interesting.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, because Disney also owns ESPN.
ESPN.
So them owning ESPN and Fox Sports would be kind of pretty interesting to me to follow, but and not just as a sports fan, but as like how TV media and TV rights work, and someone owning like the two biggest like sports out there.
Absolutely. And actually I read this, and it just popped up, but so they'd own both of those sports networks, But one of the other reasons they were talking about buying 20th Century Fox is not because of X-Men or any of those movies, but Disney is going to start their own streaming service like Netflix, a competing service against them. So if they buy 21st Century Fox, they'll own Futurama, The Simpsons, like just tons of stuff that they can put up on their streaming service.
Yeah.
And in fact, actually, I heard this on another podcast, I think, actually. But 39% of all the movies are either Disney or Fox. So that's just a massive amount of content.
It's big news for the movie world, I think.
Yeah, so that was my news. What have you been thinking about lately, Justin?
Yeah, so this weekend I actually went to a film festival for my feature film. So I didn't really watch like anything that people have heard of.
Yeah,
It was all a lot of like indie films. It was a very small film festival. It was in San Marcos, Texas, and it was in its first year. So having gone to several other film festivals that are well established and have been running for a long time, there's obviously some room for improvement for it to grow and do a bit of a better job, I think, like promoting some of the films. And I know like we showed up to see some films and then like the events had been canceled and whatnot. But like, you know, I think it's all part of like the growing pains.
basically that's what
Of
we're
an indie
doing
film
here
festival.
too. Is,
Yeah.
like the growing pains.
The most interesting thing that I saw there was they actually screened a rough cut of a film that had been shot in San Marcos like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and they were kind of in the rough cut stages. Because the interesting thing about it is that they screened in the place in San Marcos where it was shot. Like it was a film that primarily took place in one location, and so they set up like a projector and some like chairs and picnic tables and benches like outside at that location to screen the rough cut of the film, which was pretty cool. And the film actually had Lorelei Linklater, which is Richard Linklater's daughter, in the film, and who is also in a Criterion movie, and that's how this is relevant.
Boom, 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 boom.
Brought it around.
I'm curious about what are the advantages of screening a rough cut? I mean, I would say you'd want to wait, or did they maybe not get it finished in time and they're like, well, this is good enough?
I really don't
What would
know.
the advantage be?
I really don't know. I got to meet the director and talk to her a little bit, and from what she said, it sounded like she was excited to like screen the film for some people, because so far it's just been like her and like close friends that have seen it, and she's like been editing it for I think like a year, and so she's like super blinded to it, so she can show the film to other people, get feedback on like fresh eyes on it.
Yeah, so it's a small film festival, and she can get feedback without putting it out there for a lot of people to judge.
And I mean, to be fair to your question, like it's super weird for a rough cut to be screening at a film festival. Yeah. I've never seen that or heard of that. I've heard of submitting your rough cut to a film festival.
Yeah, and because
in the
you're
submission
working on
process,
it.
because it's a work in progress. Yeah. And you're basically saying I'll have the film done by the time that the festival happens. If I were to guess, what I think happened was the festival, being in its first year, wanted to drum up some interest in it, and part of that is like, what if we had this film that was shot here and we showed it in the place it was shot? And
Linklater's daughter doesn't hurt things.
And yeah, Lorelei Linklater doesn't hurt. And probably they were just like, how about you just show your rough cut if she said it wasn't finished and that she couldn't show it? And so I imagine that was a bit more of the film festival's request.
Yeah, I could see doing that just to get feedback, in a small venue type, like getting some feedback, seeing what people think of it. Getting new ideas after you've been working on it for so long. That makes sense.
Yeah, if it was a huge film festival like Sundance, or you wouldn't show your rough cut there. You would certainly show your finished product. But it's so small that like in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it really matters. Maybe the only thing it could hurt is like world premiere status.
Your film festivals, you've been to several film festivals now. What is that experience like, taking your film to film festivals?
Going to the film festivals is, I mean, a lot of fun. You get to go for free and get to see, all the films for free and get access to all like some of them do like dinners and brunches and things like that. And you get to go and hang out and meet other filmmakers, other people that are kind of in the same place as you. A lot of them, at least like the ones we've been to, because, we haven't been to like Sundance or anything huge. but you get to meet a lot of other people who are kind of in the same place as you, and you can kind of network and meet people to help you out and like hopefully help you out when it comes to the next project, and meet people who have like a specialty. Like I'm not just meeting like directors and actors. I've met like directors of photography, people who did sound for a film.
So it's almost like what would you call that? Resourcing or like a job?
Networking.
Networking, but like a weekend of networking, I guess.
Yeah.
But isn't there a...
That's my favorite part about it. Like I like
just talking
networking and talking to other filmmakers and seeing their films and, talking about each other's films.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. But that was, I was there for 4 days. So it kind of took up a lot of my time I would normally hang out and watch other movies. So that's that's what I had to talk about today.
I mean, this week's movie was so short that I don't think you didn't have to like make sure that you had a good block of time.
No, I watched it.
Yeah, like on your phone.
I watched it between films.
Yeah, on your phone.
I was waiting for one film to start. Okay, so that does it for the current movie news talk. And I guess we'll move into Seven Samurai.
Before we get into it, I want to make sure that I warn all of you guys out there. Spoilers. Be alert. They're coming. And it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, if you're a spoiler, watch out.
Yeah. We're coming for you, spoilers. But yeah, seriously, if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it, and then you can come back.
Yeah. We feel like we have to do the spoiler alert for some reason. I don't know that we do. If we don't, let us know.
Yeah.
Shoot us a Facebook comment, Facebook message, email, brick through the window, whatever you want. Just let us know if this whole spoiler alert segment is necessary. So moving on, going into Seven Samurai. Yeah, so Seven Samurai is a Japanese film. It is Criterion Spine number 2, the second DVD/Blu-ray that they've released. It's about a village who has hired 7 samurai to help defend their village from attack by bandits who intend to steal all of their food. Chris, do you want to tell us who directed Seven Samurai?
Yes, I do. Akira Kurosawa.
Who?
Excuse me. Sorry, I had to...
It's a hard name to say.
Yeah,
I cough
tough.
every time that's why I threw it to you, because I don't want to cough.
But I like saying it. Akira Kurosawa. That's who directed it. And he quite possibly is my favorite director, I think. He's up there, at least. He has a massive influence on basically all of cinema.
All of it. Legitimately, that's
legitimately,
not a joke.
Yeah. We have, The Magnificent Seven, The Wild Bunch. Anytime a team gets together, and this movie specifically. The other thing is he's influenced Steven Spielberg, George Lucas. In fact, later on in his life, where he was considered to be too American, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg gave him money to make another movie. Ron, I think it was.
I thought I read Kagemusha.
Kagemusha. That's what it was.
Kagemusha.
Yes, you're right. It was, if I'm pronouncing that right. But they gave him money.
Surely we're not pronouncing it right.
Yeah. But yeah, they gave him money because they loved his film so much, and he was no longer able to get funding in Japan, that they gave him money to do this.
I think it's a bit like when the parents take care of the children.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
The children grow up, and eventually the children come back and help out the parents.
Yeah.
Circle of life.
Circle of life.
Right
and actually, if you want to talk about the circle of life...
I don't.
Kurosawa, he was really heavily influenced by the likes of John Ford and Westerns, like American Westerns. The Circle of Life, he's influenced by John Ford. He makes Seven Samurai and other samurai movies, and in turn, those influence back to America.
And back to American Westerns.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, as you said, one of the biggest American Westerns was The Magnificent Seven.
Especially for this film.
Yeah, and
the spaghetti westerns later on.
Very clearly a remake of Seven Samurai, just as a western, and additionally, Pixar's A Bug's Life. Also,
maybe my favorite remake of Seven Samurai.
Akira Kurosawa's background. I read that he first was like seeing a lot of films because his father liked to take him and his like brothers and sisters to go see a lot of films. And similar to who we talked about last week, Jean Renoir, Kurosawa studied painting. And I don't know that Renoir studied painting specifically, but his dad was a painter.
Yeah, certainly influenced. Yeah,
I think there's very clearly already a strong connection between, painting and film, and how the masters of cinema have been influenced by painting. When he started in film, he started out as an assistant director and then eventually moved on to start making his own films. The first big film that he had kind of international success with was Rashomon in 1948. And for that film, he won the Oscar for Best Foreign Film and also won the top prize at Venice Film Festival.
Did he start directing before World War II? Like, there are some of those movies that are before World War II, though, right?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because if he was filming before World War II, like most of those films were lost in the fire bombings. So like, and I'm pretty sure that Toshiro Mifune one, the Doctor one, was before World War II. But anyways, that's really
I don't know. I think we have a lot of Akira Kurosawa films coming up, so I think that's a question that we'll keep in mind for the
we'll save
next one because I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Yeah. I did want to say, so an interesting fact is when they were making this film, they delayed it twice because Godzilla was actually being made at the same time. And the Toho studios didn't have enough money. So this movie took 154 days to film over a year's time. And so they were trying to do Godzilla and Seven Samurai at the same time. So they were running out of money, and they had to shut down Seven Samurai twice. But Kurosawa was so confident. He's like, I've already shot enough of this film that I have to finish it. So he just go off and fish in the downtime.
Well, and what better time to get fishing in than when your movie's being shut down and potentially bankrupted and not going to happen? I guess it's also worth talking about two of the lead actors in the film, who are Toshiro Mifune and Takashi Shimura. All of Kurosawa's films had at least one of them in it, just about all of them.
I would, yeah.
And so they work together a lot. And this is one of the films that actually has both of them in it.
And I love both of them.
They're both great.
Both really awesome. So I'm going to ask you a question real quick.
Sure.
Which is your favorite Seven Samurai?
Of the seven?
Yeah.
I really like the older one who is kind of like the strong, silent one, just about. He doesn't say a lot. He's the guy that runs off and steals the musket and comes back. I think it's something that comes out in Westerns later of the silent hero who just goes and does what he needs to do and doesn't really talk about it or talk about his feelings about it. And he's just kind of, because I believe in the scene where he goes to steal the musket, he's just like, you don't go, you're going to die. And then he just starts walking, basically.
Right. And then when he comes back, he just hands it off back to the guys, and then he just goes and sleeps.
Yeah, just hands it back to him. He's like, all right, going to sleep now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, that would be my favorite samurai as well. And I was actually thinking while we were watching it last night, it's so interesting, the acting, and Toshiro Mifune's character was so wild. And I think in American cinema, or what we expect from a lot of, it's almost bad to show emotions. So when we watch a Western or we watch, we like this strong, silent type, a lot of times. And both of us, our favorite samurai is the one that,
Oh, is that yours too?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't
definitely.
ask you. I apologize.
Oh, well, I
feel
said
bad
it afterwards, but yeah.
Well, I didn't listen to you. I also feel bad for that.
You kind of broke my heart. This podcast is over.
Oh, crap. We only made it 2 in. Sorry, everybody.
Well, 1.5. But yeah, I think that's a major difference between maybe just Japanese cinema in general, but the strong, silent John Wayne type, which I guess is also represented in this movie, in The Seven Samurai, in our favorite samurai. But then the Toshiro Mifune character is kind of just over the top. And
yeah, I think you see the two different types. And you see the American influence on Kurosawa as well, like you said, with John
Wayne.
Did we talk about the influence of this film on Star Wars?
We haven't. It's an interesting question because I'm not sure. I know there's another movie that's one of his other ones, Hidden Fortress, is more of a claim to fame for being
Being influential on Star Wars?
heavily influencing Star Wars.
Yeah. Do you want to save that talk for that one? We can just kind of leave it a cliffhanger.
I mean, I think what we can say now is Seven Samurai and Akira Kurosawa, just in general, influenced George Lucas's work in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I'm going to pitch you an idea. So a remake of Seven Samurai, except for it's Star Wars.
Would I watch it? Or do you?
No. Well,
am I
obviously,
interested in
you're
the
going to
idea?
watch it because it's amazing already.
Yeah.
There's no not watching that.
No.
Like, you could have a fallen Jedi. Like, yeah, they'd be fallen Jedi. They'd be wandering Ronin.
I guess between episode 3 and episode 4 of Star Wars.
Yeah, it could really take place anywhere, I think. Like, you could do it in the... Well, maybe not at the prequels, but we don't... But you could do it before the prequels, and just... It wouldn't even have to be tied to the overall arching story.
Yeah.
You just do Seven Samurai... Star Wars.
Seven
edition.
Jedi.
Yeah, Seven Jedi. Oh, my phone's ringing. What is that? Disney? Hello? Yes, thank you. You heard this already. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to pass you over to Justin, and this bit's already gone on too long.
So, Kurosawa in general being like a huge influence on George Lucas and Star Wars, was there anything that you picked up on in Seven Samurai that made you go like, I see that George Lucas did that in Star Wars?
Not right off. I'm guessing that you have something, though.
No, not. I mean,
No?
I just wanted to see if you did. The only thing, and it's something from like a lot of Kurosawa's movies, anyways. But like the wipe transition.
Oh yeah.
But I think that's not like exclusive to Seven Samurai,
Right.
Which
Yeah.
people make fun of George Lucas for.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it. I've heard it. I've heard people give him crap for.
I think it got a little. I mean, I know we're not really talking about Star Wars, but it did get a little ridiculous in the prequels.
Yeah, I think the transitions were probably the least of
Yeah, the problems.
the prequels problems.
Okay.
But okay, so I guess moving into like talking about the film itself as opposed to like the history and the director and influences and all that.
The question is where do we start?
Yeah.
I think I would start with, and I think you can answer this question. In a lot of these shots, this is where it's brilliant. Like, you don't even have to like the movie, but it's a technical marvel to watch. What did you call it earlier? The depth of field. Yeah, the depth of field where everything is always in focus is amazing to me. And the camera will move and everything will stay in focus as well. And that's just it's really a marvel to watch.
So basically in filmmaking, you have what is called a depth of field, and that is the area of the image that is in focus, right? And you have different methods of making depth of field larger to where more areas in focus, or shallower where less is in focus. Modern cinema does tend to have a lot more shallow focus. That's where you get like your really smeary backgrounds and like blown out lights that just turn into like full on like circle gobs of light. This kind of actually goes back to Citizen Kane and Orson Welles. This is something that they did, which was before Seven Samurai was made. But they kind of were the first big film to employ like this great depth of field where like the whole image is in focus. And the way that you do that is the way a lens works is it has an aperture on it, and the more open that aperture is, the more light gets in. So therefore, the less light you need on your subject. And if you have your lens open like that, you have a smaller depth of field, a smaller area of the image that's in focus. If you close that circle, the aperture down inside the lens, that extends your depth of field. So the greater of an area is in focus. So in order to achieve like a huge depth of field, like Orson Welles did in Citizen Kane and Kurosawa does in Seven Samurai and a lot of his other films too, they would close the aperture down on the lens and get this great depth of field. And the downside of that is that you need a lot more light because your aperture hole is smaller. So like in order to do that, you have to like pump light into like your set. So like when I watch a film like that, like this with these, it's called like deep focus. Mm-hmm. So when I watch a film like that, I feel for the actors so bad and everybody on set because like I know there's just a ton of light.
Yeah, there's a story, and it's in one of Kurosawa's later movies, but it was just so hot on stage or wherever they were filming in the studio that he ended up throwing up because he was so hot.
Yeah. I've acted as when I was in film school, I acted in like my student film projects and obviously you've acted in some film stuff too. So you've been under lights, but like student film, they don't like to use a lot of lights. So I've been under like the smallest of lights and just completely sweating. Like I can only imagine.
Theater's worse for me, like because you go out there, especially one that's where they start pumping in those lights.
Is there anything else you want to touch on as far as like depth of field?
No, that was a really interesting. I didn't exactly know how that worked.
Did I explain it well?
I think so. Yeah, you just small aperture, more light, and it gives you more focus. I found interesting though, because he moved the camera, and then everything would be, and he'd set up his new shot, and then everything would be in focus, and then he would move it in another direction. You do like 2 or 3 moves during a take.
Yeah.
And I don't for everything to remain in focus seems pretty crazy during that shot would be crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's partially having like a great depth of field. You can do that. And also generally like on the camera, you'll have a dedicated person who's pulling focus, like changing the focus on the lens. So they'll practice, they'll go to each position and set where they know the actor's going to be and have the focus. So they have a person.
It didn't seem like there was any...
There's no like focus change.
Yeah, there wasn't a focus change.
And that's possible. Like if they have deep enough depth of field, then it's totally possible to do that. But that's
really hard.
Also,
really hard.
That takes a lot of light. So it's possible that they had, and if you have a large depth of field, as you're changing focus, it's not quite as noticeable as if you have a really small, like the focus changes we're used to seeing now of like racking focus are really apparent because the depth of field's so shallow that you can see that line of focus like go from like point A to point B. Mm-hmm. But when you have greater depth of field, it's a little less. You can be a lot more subtle with it as well. So I'm sure that it's a combination of both, depending on the shot that you're talking about.
I have another question.
Okay,
so
I have another answer.
There was this. Is this the first? Well, we probably don't know this off the top of our heads, but the slow motion, like when the first bandit is killed when he frees the child at the very beginning.
Right.
They use the slow motion there, and then the slow motion when our favorite samurai, the stoic face.
Yeah, when he kills that dude that's like kind of trying to challenge him.
Yeah. Is this the first
use of
example?
slow-mo?
Yeah.
I wish I knew that. I don't.
Okay.
I can't imagine that it is. This may go all the way back to like the very first like thing that kind of started this idea of moving pictures was there was 2 guys, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but they had a bet of whether or not at any point during a horse running that like they had it, that at some point all 4 legs are off the ground. And we got one guy saying, no, that's impossible. The other guy says, no, I think it happens. So they set up this experiment to take a series of like quick burst photos to capture a horse galloping so they could see if at any point like all 4 legs are off the ground. And I think had they captured in regular motion, it would have been difficult to tell, but the way that they did it, it's obviously kind of slowed down. Like, I don't know if that almost counts as slow motion to me. And that wasn't like a fluid film. It was just a series of photographs that showed a progression. And I think that sort of sparked some ideas for people of like, well, if we take photos fast enough, we can create movement.
Right. Yeah. I really normally slow motion isn't my thing, but if it's done well, it's really good. And in these 2 moments, it was really...
Yeah, and that's actually something that I did want to talk about is that I believe those 2, there might be a third, but I think it's just the 2 instances where that happens. But like, those are the only 2 deaths in the film that are shot in slow motion.
Right.
And there's obviously a reason for that. And I'm not totally sure what that is. I've been thinking about it. I haven't been able to like land on an answer, but do you have any ideas? Why do you think that he would shoot just those 2 deaths in slow motion? Because those guys that die aren't main characters. They're just like random, like guys for like, they're just fodder. Yeah. Like a stormtrooper, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think that might be why, like an emphasis on how good, I don't remember the character's name.
The like lead samurai,
the
one
lead
who
samurai
is bald.
Yeah, that and how good this other character's the skill is when the stoic faced one. How good his skill is, I think, and it's an emphasis on also their life is a life of violence, and that's where it's introduced. And, later on we'll see the actual violence happening, and it's not so pretty,
Is it, so you're saying it's maybe like for effect to like show that like this is the violence that these samurais live in and what they endure?
I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but that's my interpretation.
Yeah, I don't think any of us. I mean, it's a little too late to ask Kurosawa. Also, I'm wondering, could it be a matter of perspective? Because I think at this point in the film, our perspective is that of the villagers, right? And we're seeing from their point of view as they're meeting these samurais and seeing what they can do, like, just like them when the samurai cuts off his like top knot and goes and pretends to be a monk. We don't necessarily know what his plan is and what he's going to do. So we're watching from their eyes, right? Mm-hmm. And in the other scene where the guy's like challenging him, we don't know if he can beat him, if he's going to win, like what really would have, what was going to happen. And so I think like the slow-mo kind of exaggerates like that violence and their skill, as you were saying. I think that makes sense for that to be from the perspective of these these villagers,
wide-eyed villagers, farmers watching this happen with our for the first
in
time.
awe and impressed. And then maybe that's why like as we get to know these samurais and as others die, we and the villagers become more used to the idea of what the samurai do and like the death that they cause. And
that's an interesting take. I think that's right.
I haven't figured it out, but I've been thinking about it all day. But once we're sitting here talking and you started going off, I was like,
so we brought up that scene, and I want to talk about that scene for a little bit. The top knot scene.
Yeah, me too.
Because that is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. I think it's so good, and you're right, because we see it from the peasant's point of view. He walks down, sits, and cuts his top knot, and I think you kind of have to understand what that means for the samurai. Like cutting your top knot.
I think we should stop and talk about that.
Yeah, is the most shameful thing that you could do.
Yeah. From what I read, it's when you cut off your top knot, you're essentially denouncing your status as a samurai and assuming that like you're going to have a much lower status in life and like be poor and sort of a peasant from that point.
Yeah, and the fact that he's willing to do that for the, for just this one little kid is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think once you know that, it really helps set up even more like the dire situation that everybody is in. Yeah. That like the samurai are in, that like I'm willing to take that risk because like I don't really, even though I'm a samurai, I don't have much lower to go because I'm starving.
Right. I think it shows also that he's an honorable guy. But I love the way, the whole crowd comes in and they gather around him while he's cutting it. The other thing is we're introduced to all three of our main samurais in that same sequence. In fact, the lover boy samurai shows up and doesn't even have he walks into the frame and then he walks out with the crowd. So he doesn't even have a line. He's just, they're just part of the crowd. And
I think that would speak to like Kurosawa's ability as a filmmaker to choreograph that and to like shoot that scene in a way where like we notice that guy, like we notice the lover boy samurai, as you called him, that when he pops up later, we're like, oh, it's the guy from like, even though he's like in amongst a bunch of other people, we know, oh, that's that guy from earlier. And that's like something you do obviously as a filmmaker is like set up something and then pay it off later.
Right.
I guess like speaking of like Kurosawa's ability as a filmmaker, are you aware of what an extreme close-up is?
Yeah.
Other than like not in the Wayne's World sense where.
No, it's well, I guess I'm going to take a guess at it, but it's just where it's right up on the face.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's very close on something. Usually, I guess like it would be in reference to the face. The beginning of the movie, when the village is all standing around talking about like what are they going to do, like up to that point, the movie has been a lot of wider shots with like 4 or 5, maybe even like 25 characters like in the frame at once. And the first extreme close-up in the movie is on the kind of younger guy in the village who's like, we need to kill him, we need to stand up for ourselves. And like that ultimately is like what happens and like sets forth like the plot of the movie. And the close-up like that is such a powerful like thing to do in cinema. And I may be speaking from like having seen like a ton of student films from my time in film school and a ton of like indie films, going to film festivals, but like the extreme close up gets used just for no reason. Yeah, and I see it a lot.
It's supposed to be an exclamation point.
Yeah.
And people are just using it willy-nilly.
Yeah, and I think just like his choice of like, because it's jarring when it happens, because you're in these wider shots and with multiple characters, and then all of a sudden you have a frame that's basically just a guy's like face, not even his full head, if I recall correctly. It's like cuts him off at the forehead and then just below the chin. It's really impactful, and that choice to use it at that moment and like the thing that sets off the whole film and the whole story is like, I just really appreciate.
That's the inciting incident, right? So
yeah.
The inciting incident being the thing that sends these people on their journey in any movie.
Yeah. So the next thing that like, I guess we're kind of like going in order of the film here.
Yeah.
For the most part, jumping around a little bit, but not much. But one of the things that I connected with is like when the samurai are on their way to the town, and like you find out that like everyone in the town is afraid of these samurai, and the irony of like they've hired these samurai to protect them, and as soon as they're about to come to town, everyone runs and hides, right?
Well, they're both they're afraid of the samurai, but it's like kind of their only choice, right? So they're also very afraid of the samurai, but they're more afraid of the bandits. So
I mean, in some ways, for them, they're choosing like the lesser of two evils.
Or in their minds, they are.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we at that point kind of realized that we're aware that the samurai aren't evil.
Yeah, and they're not necessarily welcome. I think that's actually kind of gets or ties back to last week's as well, but it's kind of about the caste system, right? It's you have your farmers, you have the bandits, and you have the samurai, and they shouldn't ever mix, like type of thing.
Do you think that this is something that they were always going to be afraid of, or do you think that this is set off by that guy who like runs home and he sees his daughter and he's like, look at your long hair, you're a beautiful woman, like these samurai are coming, you have to cut your hair, and like he freaks out, she freaks out, it causes a whole scene, and then everyone's afraid of the samurai. Do you think it was caused by that, or was it already something that
I think it was always going to happen. I think that was it's kind of just the nature of how things work. The same way that like they were hiding stuff from the samurai, like they may have not been quite as bad off as they were telling the samurai that they were. Like I don't think Kurosawa really liked the farmers very much. I don't.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't think that they asked for help and they hide from them. They're not very honorable. There's a couple of them that are, but for the most part, they ask for help and shun them when they do try to help. And
yeah, and I don't think, and maybe you feel differently, but I don't think he actually portrays them as the most brave of people.
No, most of them are cowards.
Either.
There's the one whose idea it was to go find the samurai. Like he fights alongside them and fights well. We're skipping to the end, but it's pretty ridiculous. So the samurai will knock someone off the horse, and then you'll see all the farmers swarm them and just like poke them with these long sticks, poke them to death, Or
once they're down, they start kicking them.
Once they're down, they don't do any actual fighting. They just kind of take them out after they've been knocked down.
I don't have like a huge knowledge or even like a medium-sized knowledge of samurais and the world that they lived in, but the samurais before like this point in the film where they're in a famine and they're like hungry and out of work, like before that they were like very, very high on like the social class system, right?
Once again, I don't have a large knowledge either. It depended. So like if you had a lord, then yeah, you kind of were up there. But a lot of, and this is what happens in this, because this is a time of war. And so what happens is everybody's fighting, the lord gets killed, and you're disgraced because you're a samurai and your lord got killed. And so you started wandering around. So yeah, as long as you had a lord, you were pretty high up there, but like it was very tenuous at best.
Sure. And if you had a lord, you're typically under their employ, you're carrying out their bidding, and it kind of seemed like the known thing about samurais is that for lack of a better term, they like to sexually assault women.
Yeah. Oh, they took
Right?
what they could. I mean, the samurai weren't necessarily that different than the bandits, even. You know,
Right.
like at
They
times
they pillaged,
Yeah, they
plundered
did their own
for
pillaging.
maybe at like a lord's bidding, but they did the same stuff that the bandits are doing now.
Right.
So once like the samurai get into town, this is when we really start to like get to know them. And something that I heard on a YouTube essay on Kurosawa was that he liked to ask his actors to pick like a movement or like some weird sort of like physical action.
One action
to repeat over and over again, so that like
to define the character.
to define their character. So we would see him and like while watching the film, I was like, Mifune's scratching a lot. Like, what's that about? Like, he keeps scratching himself. Like,
is he addicted to something?
This is weird. Like,
and then the leader scratched his bald head the whole time. You know, rubbed it whenever he was thinking. You know.
Yeah. Other films I've seen, like I've gotten confused on like what characters are who. You know,
especially you got Seven Samurai and then a whole town of so you got to be able to differentiate.
Yeah, you have like a ton of people in this movie, and it's black and white, so we can't put one in a red shirt, we can't put another in a green shirt, which is a very easy way to do it. Kurosawa's ability to like never ever confuse me on who's who in this film is like it's worth commenting on. It's worth like praising him for, because I've seen movies with like way different looking characters that like some even get confusing on like who's what and who wants what. So I don't know. I just thought that
the
that's
gesture
worth
is really something, and it actually I think it helps the acting too. Like if you choose a gesture or something for your character.
Is that like a thing where giving an actor something to do helps their performance? Does it fall into that, or is that something kind of different?
That's something kind of different, and it also kind of depends on what kind of acting you're doing. You know, there's like all sorts of different schools of acting.
Okay, so does it help the acting in the sense of like if you're doing that's something your character's doing, so it like help you get into your character more?
And everybody's different. Every actor's different when it comes to stuff like that. So sometimes it may not help him, but he's like, for instance, Toshiro Mifune is always scratching. Like he's almost always about ready to burst out of his clothes. So like he's just like containing this animal. Maybe that's why he's scratching. It's like that's an animal gesture. Whereas the other gesture that we're talking with the leader, he's always thinking.
Yeah,
and
he's
like
a lot
considering
more,
things.
He's a lot more mental.
Touching his head.
So I think as an example of Kurosawa's like ability to like frame a shot, and this is something we were talking about earlier of like the shot moving around and his ability to frame, and like there's this one shot of Toshiro Mifune's character teaching like the men that are carrying spears, and at first all you see is him talking to them and like kind of berating them and getting to like stand up straight.
Where they're when they first get to the village and they're kind of checking out the surroundings, but then as they walk around the village and then you look at the map, maybe this is the best descriptive, but you look at the map and you see this is the west and this is the east.
Yeah.
And then while they're walking around, you get like a little character development from like a lot of the other samurai.
It's either during that part or it's like shortly after that part. And also another just like compliment of Kurosawa that way is like really genius of like letting us know like the layout of this village, because I'm no longer confused about what roads leads where, and like I fully understand the layout and like the setting.
Not only do we know where everything is, but in that same like little 5-minute scene, for however long it goes, we also get like just that little bit of a character glimpse at all the different samurai, like and who they are and what kind of.
Yeah, and I think so. The going back to the scene, which either happens at then or like right after then, Mifune's teaching the men and he's like kind of berating them, like hold your spear up straight, and then the camera dollies over to the right and the kind of circular dolly to the right, and reveals like the group of kids watching him. And then he starts doing like an impression of like this like old man who's kind of like hunched over with a spear and making the kids laugh. And that's like the first time I think we see those kids and like their sort of like amusement at Mifune's character. And it's a really good example of not just having your shot like exist and then at the end of the shot, we're still in the same place, like in terms of story or emotionally. Like we start and we think it's just this guy berating these men, and then we dolly over and it's like, oh, all these kids love him, and we see Mifune in a slightly different light. I think we suddenly get this like glimpse of what these kids see as he then turns goofy and makes them laugh, and like so within one shot, just by moving and like showing us a little more of the scene, he's developed that character.
Yeah, he does that a lot where he's telling the story through the camera but not through dialogue. You know, like no one tells us that, oh, the kids are following Mifune around.
Exactly.
You know, we just see it happen, and it's through the camera. Anyways, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but like I remember those kids like being in love with Mifune. Mm-hmm. This is like my third time to see Seven Samurai, and the last time I watched it was probably 6 years ago. But in my head, like I remember these kids like playing with Mifune and like just being like head over heels, and him like interacting with them. And I remember it being this huge part of the movie, but like really like watching it now, it's not as big. Like they don't interact with them that much. And that I think that speaks to like how strong of a...
You're right. I had the same reaction. Yeah. And when we were talking about it before, I was like, because that's what I remembered. Like, so I was like, oh, the kids, and then they're not really, they don't follow him around that much. But I remembered it, it was much bigger in my head. And that's because of the camera shots, like you were saying.
Yeah, so. and Kurosawa's ability as a filmmaker to like really portray that and drive that point home. And it's so subtle.
Yeah.
Like way more subtle than it could be. Like, I don't like some modern movie, like someone would come out and then like
there'd be the one cute kid.
These kids
in
love
a modern.
you.
Oh yeah, but there'd be the one cute kid that like followed Toshiro Mifune, like all the kids. But there'd be this one cute kid, and you'd feel really bad, and maybe at the end he'd be in jeopardy. Or something.
And Mifune would also have like a love interest too. It'd be like, you're so great with these kids. It makes me think of you as a dad, and we'd get into all that stuff. And Kurosawa doesn't do any of it, and it's that powerful that it affects my memory. All right, so in the middle of this film is an intermission. So, like intermission, I've seen other like older films that have intermission, and like obviously like, modern films, none of it. There's not a whole lot of like 3.5 hour long, 4 hour long films like now.
If there are,
but
they
like,
ask you to sit through the whole thing.
yeah, and there's something that like. When a movie's going and then it like fades out and this intermission pops up where I'm just like, there's something that like hits me in like a special spot where I'm just like, yes, intermission. This is like, not that I get excited about the intermission, but that this film is like so like epic that it has to have an intermission. And I know it partially has to do with length, but maybe like a lot of the films that I've seen that have intermissions are these epic films like Lawrence of Arabia and, Gone with the Wind, like these big sprawling movies. I feel like there's just something about the intermission that like just really
makes it feel special.
Yeah, it's just like a little extra spice of like epic to a film. I don't know if that's just me. Do you feel that way?
Well, if I were in a movie theater, I think I would feel a little bit like that. So if I was in the movie theater, I'd leave and I'd go to my friend and be like, hey, what do you think so far? And that would be cool because then you're building up to the next segment of it. Or like theater, a lot of times that happens. Intermissions are special for sure. Or a sign of a time past, because we don't really get that many intermissions anymore.
Well, I think the big question is, do we put an intermission in this podcast?
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, something else I want to talk about was the scene where they go and they set fire to like the bandits' place, and there's this woman who she like wakes up in the fire, looks around kind of weird. I thought she was gonna lay back down for a second, and then later on, that same woman like she runs out of the building as it's like engulfed in flames and stands there for like a little bit, and then she runs back in and presumably dies. And I just like I don't know if I just didn't connect with it, or maybe like I just looked away at the wrong time and missed the subtitle, but like I just didn't get that scene. Can you tell me what that is about?
Well, I can't really tell you. Like, so she wakes up and she's kind of just like, it looks like she's high. And I don't know if that's a thing that happened back then in Japan, but it looks like she's high.
Like opium.
Yeah, like an
thing?
opium
Okay.
type thing. And I think that that's probably a thing that they would do, the bandits, or at least that's what I would assume, and that's how you would keep the women complacent. So she may have been high, but then she runs out. The one thing you're missing is that our intrepid farmer, the one that wanted to call the samurai in, runs to her. They don't say anything, but she runs back in. And then afterwards, they're like, why did you do that? Why did you run up to her?
Yeah.
Because that's when he got shot. That was his wife.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like maybe she felt shame for...
like knowing what she's done and been through.
And I don't know. I think it's a dramatic moment. I don't know if that's why exactly she runs back in. So, I didn't necessarily connect with her in the fire. You're like, what's going on there? I think it's probably she was high on something. And then she runs out and sees her old husband, and she had probably been forcibly removed from being, she probably wanted to be with him, but now she's been down this dark road, and so she runs back in.
Yeah, I think there's a lot
into it.
There is, but I don't think it's that far of a stretch because there's a lot of like shame and honor that like in that culture of that time period, and so I don't know. I think that kind of makes sense to me. That would explain that. I don't know that it's the definitive answer, but
it's also a distraction for our first samurai to be killed. So like this happens, and then the gun goes off, and our first samurai dies, and so I kind of think that's the first part of it.
Sure. Okay. I think going off of women who die in this film, there's another interesting scene. So at this point in the film, we've gotten to the big battle. The bandits are finally attacking and there's like the ton of great like action sequences and a ton of like great action filmmaking on display throughout all those battles. But like something that really stuck out to me amidst all of it is when they're running to like the wheelhouse
to save grandpa, or granddad,
grandma, and like the couple who went after him.
I thought it was just grandpa that was out there.
Did I say grandma?
Yeah.
Okay, well I meant grandpa.
Oh, okay.
I misspoke.
Granddad, yeah.
Yeah, granddad, and they go out there to save him, and then the couple of the samurai go after them once that wheelhouse is on fire and burning down. And this woman comes out, and they run into her, and she's been stabbed in the back with like a spear, and she's holding her baby, and like as soon as they take the baby, she dies. And then one of the samurai says like,
Toshiro Mifune.
Toshiro Mifune says like, she was stabbed with a spear. How did she even like make it this far? And I guess
strong will.
The implication is like mother's adrenaline, like I have to save this baby, and like it was like she kept herself alive long enough to like make sure the baby was okay, and then like died immediately, and that just seemed really crazy to me.
Yeah, the first thing, so when the couple ran out there with the baby, so they're like, oh, we got to get granddad. I don't know why, and I watched it with a friend, and his comment was, why are they taking the kid? But the reason they're taking the kid is so that, so there's, maybe the stakes are higher. Also, Toshiro Mifune has...
From a writing standpoint?
Yeah.
They don't want their stakes to be higher.
Yeah, they don't want to. They're like, how can we make this more dangerous for us? No. From a writing standpoint, the stakes are higher because this baby could die. But I think it's really for Toshiro Mifune to have this touching scene. Like, this baby is me. Like, this is how I came into the world. My mom was killed in the same type of situation. And, yeah. Yeah.
So do you feel that it's something that's strongly there just as a plot device and doesn't...
I don't see why it would be in there without that, if not for that reason.
Had we met that baby before?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Not in any like significant manner. I see that it's like this like plot point, but I just really like that whole scene kind of came out of left field at me, other than when Mifune grabs the baby and is like, this is me.
Yeah.
Like, this is exactly what happened to me.
It was they're kind of stretching things a bit, because the first thing I thought, I was like why do all three of them need to go? And why would you take this crying baby?
Yeah.
I mean, I love the
maybe
film.
They didn't want to be.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't want to like be separated from the baby in case anything happened.
I mean, we can.
I mean, what if you ran off to save him and then like the two of you and left your baby by itself, or even with someone else, and then like something happened, you got separated, like you don't have your baby. Then I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm not.
That's my first reactions. Why are you taking the baby out there? That's just my first reaction. Maybe there's we can probably like make excuses for it.
Sure.
But my first thought is, why are you taking the baby? And if you have any comments on why they took the baby, just email them to us.
Yeah. Email them to Chris at casuallycriterion. That's our email.
That's not true. It's casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
So I guess we're kind of in like the big final battle, like the big like action sequence of the movie, which like that whole like bandits battle thing, I think it lasts about an hour.
Does it last a whole hour?
50.
Well, you're
maybe
talking
like
about the
50
whole...
minutes.
Oh, okay.
Not like the very, very last battle where they all come in, but like just from the point where like the bandits first attack and show up to the end of the movie I think really close to an hour.
Yeah, 45 minutes to an hour for sure.
Yeah.
And it's really great. There's sometimes, it's kind of funny because we're not used to this, but I think that's kind of how modern warfare went back then. They're just kind of like swinging sticks at each other, like
until one runs away.
Yeah, or one they would ride the horses in, and then they'd ride them off, and then they'd chase them, and then they'd come back. And I think it's basically like two schoolyard kids, like just who's willing to throw the first punch, type of thing. And it was really fun to watch, and then. Just in general, the horse work and all that. So we'll go into the last
battle. Yeah. There's so many movies that like take place in the rain, but like that last battle like sticks out to me, and like because of that rain, like once it starts raining and like the rain's coming down so hard, like that battle is just so epic, like much more epic than you might
with that rain
think it would be.
And actually, the rain would be a thing that I would say about Kurosawa too. Like there's always weather, always some kind of weather in the background, whether it's rain or wind. Man, on the cemetery hill, that wind whips up and it's just
like dust blowing all over the place.
So there's almost always some kind of weather to watch or look at. But in this one, it's a character in itself. The water just keeps getting deeper. They're just like, especially Toshiro Mifune, he's wearing that outfit. He's like. And so he's not naked, but like from the waist down, he's not wearing any pants. Essentially,
it doesn't leave much to the imagination.
Yeah, he's just running around, rolling in the mud, and then the horses on top of that. Actually, so we talked about the delays earlier. So because it was delayed, it was filmed during the winter. And so you could see their breasts towards the end of the movie. But like Toshiro Mifune was like, that was the coldest I've ever been. Because he's fighting in that rain. It's just insane.
I wonder how long that took to shoot.
I don't know. I think it's a miracle if nobody got hurt. I mean, I don't know. But like with those horses falling down, that segment of the movie could not be done today. Because we couldn't put the horses at risk, the riders at risk. And that's a good thing that we protect our people.
Sure, yeah.
But we'll never be able to do that again. And CG makes things so much. We don't need to get in that argument, but like
sure, well, in green screen and
you can fix things and it's not as bad, but you'll never get that again. And how long do you think it took to film?
Yeah, I have no idea how long that would possibly take. I'm sure like at least like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I would guess like the whole like rain battle. And like for me to put it like in perspective, I was shooting a feature film with a friend, and I was just like director of photography on this film, and we had one shot where we had to like a girl had to be standing in the rain and like get soaked, and we shot it was when I was in film school, so we shot the film during winter break. Mm-hmm. So it was like late December, early January. We're doing this shot, and the girl's in like biker shorts and like a tank top with like a flannel over it, and that's it. And like this is one shot. Like we set up the shot, we turned on like the water hose that we were doing to like create the rain, and then we're like, okay, action. She walked into shot, stood there, looked up. It took like 10 seconds, and then cut, and we're done. And we did it like 3 times, I think. And so like maybe, of course she had to stand there wet between takes, but collectively maybe it was like 10 minutes that she had to be like wet and cold.
Okay.
And I felt awful.
Yeah.
Like we all felt terrible. So I can't imagine putting actors through that for like that many actors through that for like
2 weeks.
2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long it took. Maybe even if it's less, like I couldn't imagine doing it for like a day.
It took 143 days or 153 days. It could have been a whole month.
It could have been.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. My heart goes out to every actor. And my appreciation for just like the film, knowing what they went through. Speaking of the rain, I think we should talk about Mifune's character's death, because that happens in the rain. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into it. I don't know if it's one of those things where you're just like looking for meaning in something where it doesn't exist. But as soon as he dies, like he falls down and he's very dirty, because like as you said, he's like slipping around in the mud and dirt, like fighting. And like the shot lingers on him long enough for you to see the rain like wash the dirt off of his body. Like, and it's like, it's, to me, it's very noticeable. It was like very visible, to the point where like if that had bothered anybody, they would have redone it or something like that. Like it seems intentional to me, I guess.
Yeah, I think it could very well be intentional, and it's kind of what it means to you anyways. I guess we could talk about, what do you think he's saying in general about the samurai and the farmers and going from farmer? Did he go from farmer to samurai? Like, did he die a samurai, or was, like...
I guess going off of that, like are there things that, did you get the impression that like at some point he's done things that aren't necessarily honorable? At some point, as like Mifune's character has, and to fight and stick up for this village and help them, like basically just for food. Like they weren't getting a whole lot out of it other than like eating for the time that they were helping defend them. And I think he gets into it, like he is truly fighting for like them, not just himself by the end of the film. And I think, so to me, it was like his death in that like washed away, like he was returned him to honor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, and that could be why he was so fascinated with the leader, samurai. Like when they first meet, both the lover boy and the Toshiro Mifune meet them, they're like immediately drawn to him, and maybe Toshiro Mifune's never seen this in somebody before, and so he follows him, and it could be that it washes it away.
Maybe I'm reading into it too much. I think it's certainly possible. I feel like I've most definitely done it before. It's something.
Yeah. I mean, it's
something that happens.
Fun to do, really, and then to talk about it afterwards. That's why.
Even if I'm wrong, like I enjoy the process of like
trying to figure it
things, and coming up with ideas. But
so the very last scene, all the farmers go back and they're farming, and Loverboy sees the girl, and she just runs by him and goes back to farming. And then what the leader says is, "We lost again." We're the losers. The farmers are the winners. And I think that's really powerful. And what do you think that means? Let's read too much into this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in the sense of like, if you don't come out ahead, you're not the winner. And if, as Ricky Bobby says, if you're not first, you're last. Can I talk about Ricky Bobby in a Seven Samurai
podcast?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it cost them, like they lost people. They lost their lives or their friends in this fight, and they didn't gain anything, really.
No.
Like they did it for honorable reasons, I suppose.
Yeah, and they temporarily didn't starve.
Yeah, and the farmers were with them, and then once their job is done, they shun them. Like, wouldn't it be great to have those 3 guys work on your farm and they could become part of the farm? But no, these classes don't mix. These castes, they can't mix.
Yeah, and I think I reading up on like some of the samurai history, like in reference to like the top knot and stuff, is that samurai were not allowed to farm
Right.
and not allowed to work. And that's why like so many of them were starving, because if you're a samurai, you can't just go get a job. You can't farm and like work for food or money.
Yeah, it was really a thing where society, you're born into what you're gonna do, and the society tells you where you stand, and you can't move up or down, or that's where you're at for the rest of your life. And they talk about it. The farmers do. Oh, the plight of a farmer, the whole time. So yeah. Anyways, I found that really interesting and really powerful. That last image with the 4 swords sticking up on the graveyard hill, and then the 3 of them in front of it is just a really powerful image.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything to the idea that the ones who are fallen and are buried are up high, like on a hill, and your living samurais are down low, like in that shot? If I remember the shot correctly, like they're at the bottom of the frame.
The very top frame is
and
the
the very top
swords.
up on the hill, and like in the sense that that's kind of backwards from how we deal with our dead, right? Like we bury them generally. Obviously, we have like tombs and
I thought
in different ways, but
I just thought that was like the cemetery hill. Like that was the hill where everybody gets buried, because even before they buried the samurai, they go by that hill and you see what I was assuming was tombstones or something of the like, but I could be wrong. So I just thought that was the hill where all their dead were buried, even before the samurai got there. It was kind of what...
So you're not going to read into it too much, is what you're saying?
I mean, I feel like there's room to read into it,
I think so.
but that's just what I thought.
Remind me, like, what happens with the lover boy samurai and the farm girl, because I remember she goes by and he kind of like moves towards her.
He goes to,
and I got the sense that he actually like had in his brain this idea of like, what if I don't become a samurai? Because he wants to be a samurai, right? Like, he's not a great samurai, or he's not a samurai in the beginning, and
he's a
trying
kid is kind of where I get like, so he's not, and also I think
he wants to be trained,
and I think he's rich. Like, I don't know exactly, we don't know his history, but he's rich because he pays for the new rice for the farmers when they run out. I don't know exactly what he wants. I think he just wants to talk to her, and she's not. No, this isn't the right way to do things. And the night before, when they were found out, when they slept together, they're like, let the kids be kids. They're in love. And then the next day, or a few days later, it's just that these things can't mix. They're separate. So, yeah, really great film.
Amazing film.
Yeah,
I just forget how good it is. Like.
Yeah. That's probably why the podcast went a little long this week.
I think it's fair that we have a little
it's
bit of
Seven Samurai, so
longer episode.
Yeah, I don't feel bad about it.
I don't feel bad about
All
it.
right.
Do you guys feel bad about it?
They haven't listened this far. They've
We
already
don't care.
stopped.
All right, so I guess that'll do it for Seven Samurai. Chris, do you want to tell them about next week's film?
Yes, I do. Another one of my favorite directors, Alfred Hitchcock. It's Spine number 3, The Lady Vanishes. I'm excited about this one. We're on a roll. We've had 3 really good films, 2 of them that are like way up there for me.
I've never seen Lady Vanishes.
Oh, it's pretty awesome.
I'm excited.
It's available on Filmstruck for it's a streaming service for $10.99 a month, and it's available to rent on most other on-demand platforms like YouTube, Amazon, iTunes.
Yeah, so
I think it's like $2.99.
Yeah, $3.99 to like rent and watch the film. I think you have access to it to watch it for like 48 hours, something like that. But if you want to watch the film, which I think that's the best way to listen to this podcast. Watch the film and then listen.
We want friends.
So those are where you can find the film to watch it.
I think it's time for the top 3.
Yeah, I think so. Every week, Chris and I wanted to do like a top 3 of some sort. At least for now, it's going to be movie related. But what we'd really like to do is like take listener requested top 3s at some point. Just like whatever ideas you have, whatever top 3. It doesn't even have to be movies. It could be our top 3 burger fast food restaurants, and we'll do it.
It's not In-N-Out.
My In-N-Out would be on mine.
Oh,
but anyways, until then, we're making up our own top 3s. And because this last week, the Houston Astros won the World Series, and we are from Houston, And we're both very excited about that. We thought we would do our top 3 sports films.
Some of these have a lot to do with sentimentality. So they're not great films, but I love them because I was a kid when I watched them, and they stick around. So my first one is The Mighty Ducks.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All 3 of mine are The Mighty Ducks. 1,
Yeah,
2,
just
and 3.
1, 2, and 3. Yeah. When I was a kid, I could sing what is the name of that song? Bloody, you're a boy, make a big noise playing in the street, gonna be a big... Anyways.
We Are the Champions by Queen.
Yeah, We Are the Champions. So as a kid, I knew We Are the Champions because I was in the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah, you knew it as the Mighty Ducks song, not the Queen
wasn't,
song.
Yeah, it was, I want to listen to the Mighty Ducks song.
Yeah, I used to watch the Mighty Ducks so much as a kid, and I had to like give up my VHS copy for a while because my grandma came in and she heard the kids say that they really suck. And she's like, sucks is not a good word. You don't need to be watching these kind of movies. And so I had to live without Mighty Ducks for a little while until I got a little older.
What's your first one?
So my first one, which is number 3 on my list, is The Wrestler by Darren Aronofsky. And maybe it's debatable as whether or not professional wrestling is a sport.
It's close enough.
They are athletes, I say.
I've never actually seen that.
You've never seen it?
No.
Oh, it's so good.
I know I need to. I love Darren Aronofsky.
Yeah, it's my favorite Aronofsky by like miles and miles and miles and miles. Like, I think it's so good and amazing. All the performances are great. It's like shot perfectly. And
what number is that on the Criterion?
Yeah, on TBD.
Okay.
But also that might also have to do with a little bit of nostalgia for me because like middle school I was very much into like professional wrestling.
I was like, when did it come out? You weren't in middle school when it came out.
No, it came out in 2008, I believe. So I was not in middle school, but I did watch a lot of like professional wrestling, like WWF, WCW. Like this is before it was WWE.
Yeah.
And WCW didn't exist anymore. But I used to watch a lot of that. So like The Wrestler just really like hit home for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So number 2, your number 2.
Well, I'm just gonna say mine are in no particular order. It's just my 3.
Okay.
I just said Mighty Ducks. League of Their Own.
Yes.
League of Their Own. Tom Hanks is brilliant. Not to mention, I mean, like, this is a movie where, like, I'm okay with Madonna being in it. You know, like, I actually think she's pretty good. And Rosie O'Donnell and
Gina Davis.
Yeah.
Lori Petty.
Oh yeah.
Is that her name? Lori Petty?
I don't know, but I think I know who you're talking about.
The younger sister of the two pitchers. Yeah. I love League of Their Own.
League of Their Own. There's no crying in baseball.
That's right.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
And
one of my favorite innuendos ever is from that film, like sexual innuendos, if I can talk about that on here. But it's John Lovitz refers to going home to give his wife the pickle tickle. And I think that's amazing.
I don't get it.
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Okay. So my number 2, because I did them in order, is The Sandlot. And this, again, has a lot to do with like watching it a lot as a kid. And I've never really been super huge onto baseball, with the exception of the last week when the Astros were in the World Series. But I think the thing that I really love about this film is that there's no big game.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, it doesn't build up to like, oh, there's this big, huge game we have to win and like beat the guys that are better than us and like come in as the underdogs. There's none of that. The big game happens like in the middle of the movie versus like the actual real team with jerseys, and they just stomp them. Like it's not even, it's a quick montage of them beating the crap out of them.
It's a summer movie. I would say, like, I would compare it to like Big. Big takes place over a summer, and it's about these kids who are out there. They just play baseball, and that's not the important thing that they're playing baseball. It's just where they bonded over. That full disclosure, I probably would have picked that one if I didn't know that you had picked it already.
Yeah, makes sense.
But great movie.
I think it's great. Okay, your turn.
My last movie is Field of Dreams, and I know I feel like every time I talk about Field of Dreams, I get a lot of hate. People don't like it, but I love it because it's not about baseball. It's about fathers and sons and how oftentimes we communicate with our parents, or at least my dad, through sports. Like we talk about sports, and that's how we can find this common ground, and we can talk about sports. And for Field of Dreams, it means that means a lot to me. That show.
Yeah, so I've actually never seen Field of Dreams.
Well, get on it. Go do it tonight. There's no more Astros to watch, so
yeah, I gotta get my baseball fix somehow. So maybe I'll go home and watch it.
Well, if you watch it, they will come.
Okay, I like visitors.
Yeah.
So my last film, yet to be introduced to the Criterion Collection, but I'm waiting, in anticipation for it, and that is Basketball. Which I know you're laughing.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're laughing.
It just surprised me.
Good. I absolutely love this movie. I know that I'm saying basketball is like my favorite sports movie at the end of a podcast where we dissected like Seven Samurai. But like, I think this movie is so like funny and underappreciated, and like I watch it at least once a year. I mean, that's not an exaggeration at all. Like I watched it as a kid. It was one of those films that like I went to the video store and rented like every weekend. Like every time I go to the store, I would like come home usually with Basketball and another film. Or not a film, it was probably a movie when I get into the terminology. But yeah,
I watched it. I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theater, but I remember really enjoying it. It's
genuinely funny and like clever in some places. With like, it is a bit of like a spoof movie, and it falls into like the same area of humor that like Airplane and Naked Gun and like Scary Movie and Epic Movie, Blank Movie, whatever. Which like that kind of humor can work, and then it can also like fall flat on its face. And I think a lot of the more recent stuff falls flat on its face, but like Basketball like just really nails it to me.
Soon to be in the Criterion Collection.
Oh, I hope so. If we ever do top 3 of like films that should be in Criterion Collection or that you wish were in Criterion Collection, there's more like it. Basketball will be my number 1 on that one too.
All right. Well, I think that does it for the episode today.
Yeah. Just wanted to thank everybody for listening, and also send a thank you to Jake Wagner Russell, who did our intro and outro music. He creates a lot of like remixes and similar music over on soundcloud.com/bopscotch. That is bopscotch, like hopscotch, but with a B. So before we go, we just wanted to say really quickly that we really want to grow the listener base of this show so that we can like interact and have more interaction. Like we've talked about on the top 3, we would like to do like listener requested top 3s. We would also like to hear listener opinions on films, and maybe even some of the stuff we talked about, like listener corrections, just general like feedback. And we would potentially like include, some of that in the show each week. If you catch us before we record, ask like questions. And I think an important part of that is like growing our audience. And one way that you can help us do that is to review us on iTunes.
Absolutely. That's one of the bigger ones. Go on there, give us a review. Tell us what you think. Just give us 5 stars, and then you can tell us what you think after that.
If you hate us, give us 5 stars and then tell us why you hate us.
So like, follow, and subscribe, and review us on iTunes. It's going to be a really big deal.
Yeah. And other than iTunes, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/casuallycriterion podcast. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at casualcriterion. And on all those places, you can tweet at us or comment, send us a message, or you can also email us. You can email us at casuallycriterion@gmail.com.
Just like Justin's waiting by the phone for Disney to call, we are waiting for your messages and feedback. Yeah, so that's it for our show, Seven Samurai, a big behemoth of a movie. So we'll see you next week.
Big behemoth of a show.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see you next week for The Lady Vanishes. Until then, my name's Chris.
And my name's Justin.
See you guys later.
Bye.